Okay, so this is a Neos Wiseman turbo deck that attempts to bring it out by milling Neos and Yubel into the graveyard, and then special summoning them as zombie-type monsters of Zombie World through Medzuki. And maybe recovering Neos some other way or just hoping to draw into it. There's no real good way to search out Neos Wiseman, which I'll explain at the end of the video. Okay, so end of video thoughts. This deck right here, I was thinking for end of video thoughts, I might as well just combine the mousing through the things while talking about it rather than doing that and doing the end of video thoughts at the same, right afterwards. Because it seems kind of redundant to show this and then have after video thoughts. But I know some people will just skip to the end in order to see all the cards in the deck. So, for this deck right here, this is, I think, my 5th or 6th version of a Neos Wiseman deck. If you're wondering why I hadn't made a replay video in a while, it's because of this deck. I have been trying for so long to get a Neos Wiseman version to work. And every time I played Yu-Gi-Oh! I would just keep deck testing this one deck. And I lost so many times. This doesn't have an over 50% win rate. It's probably somewhere around 20%. I also didn't really bother with any duels that didn't show Neos Wiseman actually coming out. So there were a couple of other wins I got that were pointless. So, before I talk about the Zombie World version, let me show you the other versions. So, I think this was the first version. Version number... No, this is version number 2. Version number 2 of Neos Wiseman, I thought I could search out Neos Wiseman with Justice of Prophecy. Because with Justice of Prophecy, if you use a spellbook card, during the end phase, you can tribute this card and then add a level 5 or higher light or dark spellcaster type monster into spellbook. So you could add Neos Wiseman in just one of your spellbooks. And I thought, oh, perfect way to search it out. And then, I'll just use Elemental Hero Prisma as Neos, and I'll bring out Yubel by sending her to the graveyard with Armageddonite, and then using Street Patrol. No, wait. Using Armageddonite to send Street Patrol to the grave to special summon Yubel from the hand, without a way to actually search out Yubel. So I tried another version of the deck that ran Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest with rank 3 monsters and Tour Guide, and in order to search out Yubel, which is basically this deck, but it also had ways to search out Yubel, since I had multiple ways to search out Elemental Hero Prisma to get out Neos, which was no problem. Because at that point I thought, if I can just bring out Prisma with a Hero Lives, I would still have my normal summon set, in which place I could use Armageddonite, send Street Patrol, and then special summon Yubel straight from my hand, and then Neos Wiseman. Perfect. It didn't work. It was terrible. Just like this version of the deck. And then I thought, a token version. Tokens because this version of the deck is the Call of the Haunted version. Where I thought, I can just send Neos Wiseman and Yubel to the graveyard, and then special summon it with Call of the Haunted, Oasis of the Dragon Soul, Return to the Front Lines, or World Legacy Secret. There were 4 cards that could bring it out from the graveyard super easily. So I thought, perfect version of the deck. And hey, with this version of the deck, I don't have a normal summon. So I can just run tokens and use a whole bunch of link monsters and even the nightmare cards. That way, that's how I'll get the cards in the graveyard, is by discarding them with the nightmares. So Unicorn or Phoenix. That was my main way of getting them to the graveyard. And I thought, hey, if I'm running all of these, Call the Haunted cards, might as well run Thunderclap Skywolf for a full board clear. Which was good. Clearing your opponent's board during their turn while at the same time bringing out a 2500 attack beater is good. It was a lot better than what the rest of the deck was trying to do, though. And the tokens themselves... Also, a wild monster appears. It's not very good with Wiseman because it doesn't actually let him use his effect. For its own effects, and this card also shove it into the deck during the end phase. For the rest of the turn, you got normal summoner set. You cannot special summon. Your opponent takes no damage. Okay, so you can use its effect. It's just Wiseman's effect is basically about doing a whole bunch of damage, since when it attacks, it also inflicts damage to your opponent equal to their attack. So with a wild monster, he doesn't actually get his effects and just returns to your deck during your next turn. Which is like, why? Why would you do all that just to bring out a 3k beater who can't even do its burn effect damage? Which is arguably the best part of Neos Wiseman. So I ended up removing that. I was also trying out Summon Dice, because all 3 of its effects were good for this. Its first effect of a double normal summon, of a double summon, is neat. Second effect of a special summon from the graveyard is great for this deck. And the third effect of special summon a level 5 or higher monster from your hand, I thought would always be live, with Neos, Yubel, and Thunderclap Skywolf. Of course, I was just testing it to test it, and when I did test it, I was like, it's neat, but too random. I really would rather just have something that I can reliably call on. So this version of the deck, not very consistent. There was no real way to search out Yubel or Neos Wiseman, so I was kind of just hoping to draw into all 3 of them, and then have my tokens so I can go into my nightmares to discard them. Honestly, this version of the deck was pretty good, but really bad at bringing out Wiseman, so I had to get rid of it. And next up, we have the Warrior version. This is the one I thought would do really great. More Sky Striker engine stuff, also Hero Kid, and what's this one? Isolode combos. Because with Isolode, when you bring this card out, you can add a warrior monster to your hand, so Neos. And then you can special summon a Hero Kid, and then use Hero Kid to go... What was the combo with this deck? I think you can use Herald of Pure Light to recycle a card from the graveyard. I thought all that was great because Armageddonite is warrior type. I can send Street Patrol to the grave, Yubel, special summon them. You know, add Neos back to my hand. Use Skull Dread to special summon Neos from my hand. That would have been great. And then I would just have to get a way to get Yubel to my hand. And also a way to search out Neos Wiseman, and it just kind of became a clusterfuck. I couldn't figure... It was a lot better than the other versions, just because of the Isolode blades. Is it Isolode? But it just wasn't searching out Wiseman or Elemental Hero Neos or Yubel. It wasn't working. The deck itself was fine, it just wasn't going into the combo I wanted. So, on to the next version of the deck. This one I actually built on stream. I was like, you know what? None of these Neos Wiseman decks are working. How about Zombie World? Because I remember back in the day I created this Earthbound Immortal deck where I use Zombie World as the field spell card, and then I just use Medzuki to summon them from the graveyard. And I remember that deck working out really well, like surprisingly so. So I was like, you know, what if I just do that? Zombie World, and then Medzuki and Mill cards. That would like solve all of my problems of not having a way to search out these cards, because if they're in the graveyard, I don't need to search them out, and the entire deck is about special summoning from the graveyard anyway with Medzuki, and it's self comboing, because the ways to get Medzuki in the graveyard are also the same ways I get Yubel and Neos into the graveyard, just milling through Light Swords. And so this version of the deck, I mean, I went through like 3 or 4 different versions of this deck alone. Just this version of the I mean, not... I'm starting to mess up my words. I went through like 3 or 4 different versions of this deck. The first one was like a 50 card version, just trying to hull a bunch of cards. I even ran like the Solitaire combo, but that ended up being too slow, surprisingly. What I needed was like more mill, and eventually I came to this version and it worked. And eventually I had everything I needed, a way to get Yubel and Neos into the graveyard, which was through just Lightsworn milling, and a way to search out Neos with bringing out Firewall Dragon. Because this deck goes into Link monsters super easily, and getting out Firewall Dragon is super easy. That's if I needed to do that. That was always like a backup option. I also just had the notion of using Skull Dread to draw into it. Like if I found Neos Wiseman, I would just keep it in my hand and send everything else back. because I just needed Zombie World and Wiseman and Burial from a Different Dimension. I think every single time I brought out Wiseman with this version of the deck, I had at least one of these cards in my hand as well. So, Skull Dread, you helped so much. This version of just going into massive amounts of link plays and getting Medzuki in the graveyard to bring out Yubel and Neos, or having one of these guys in the hand and bringing out Skull Dread to special summon him, that effect is super helpful. Basically, Skull Dread makes this deck a lot better. And he's like the cornerstone around it. And it's kind of great that this card exists, because if I'd made it back in the day before Skull Dread, it probably wouldn't have been as good as it is now. And this was the best version I could make of the Neos Wiseman deck. After going through, let's see, this was the second version, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 versions of the deck. And this final version of the deck is like the 4th version of this deck. So, lots of work went into this incredibly mediocre deck. Don't say that I don't go through a lot of effort for gimmicks.